Chapter 28. It was her. Jack had stood on the stairs listening to the crooning, comforting sounds coming muffled through the locked door, and slowly his confusion had given way to anger. Things had never really changed, not to Wendy. He could be off the juice for 20 years, and still when he came home at night and she embraced him at the door, he would see/sense that little flare of her nostrils as she tried to divine Scott or as she tried to divine Scotch or gin fumes riding the outboard train of his exhalation. She was always going to assume the worst. If he and Danny got into a car accident with a drunken blind man who had had a stroke just before the collision, she would silently blame Danny's injuries on him and turn away. Her face, as she had snatched Danny away, it rose up before him, and he suddenly wanted to wipe the anger that had been on it out with his fist. She had no goddamn right. Yes, maybe at first. He had been a lush. He had done terrible things. Breaking Danny's arm had been a terrible thing. But if a man reforms, doesn't he deserve to have his reformation credited sooner or later? And if he doesn't get it, doesn't he deserve the game to go with the name? If a father constantly accuses his virginal daughter of screwing every boy in junior high, must she not at last grow weary enough of it to earn her scoldings? And if a wife secretly and not so secretly continues to believe that her teetotaling husband is a drunk, he got up, walked slowly down to the first floor landing, and stood there for a moment. He took his handkerchief from his back pocket, wiped his lips with it, and considered going down and pounding on the bedroom door, demanding to be let in so he could see his son. She had no right to be so goddamn high-landed. Or sooner or later she'd have to come out, unless she planned a radical sort of die for the both of them. An ugly grin touched his lips at the thought. Let her come to him. She would come in time. He went downstairs to the ground floor, stood aimlessly by the lobby desk for a moment, then turned right. He went into the dining room and stood just inside the door. Excuse me. The empty tables, their white linen cloths neatly cleaned and pressed beneath their clear plastic covers, glimmered up at him. All was deserted now, but dinner will be served at 8 p.m., unmasking and dancing at midnight. Jack walked among the tables, momentarily forgetting his wife and son upstairs, forgetting the dream, the smashed radio, the bruises. He trailed his fingers over the slick plastic dust covers, trying to imagine how it must have been on that hot August night in 1945. The war won, the future stretching ahead so various and new like a land of dreams. The bright, party-colored Japanese lanterns hung the whole length of the circular drive, the golden yellow lights spilling from the high windows that were now drifted over with snow. Men and women in costume, here a glittering princess, there a high-booted cavalier, flashing jewelry and flashing wit everywhere, dancing, liquor flowing freely, first wine and then cocktails and perhaps boilermakers, the level of conversation going up and up and up, until the jolly cry rang out from the bandmaster's podium, the cry of "Unmask! Unmask!" and the Red Death held sway. I'm having chest. He found himself standing on the other side of the dining room, just outside the stylized bat-wing doors of the Colorado Lounge where on that night in 1945 all the booze would have been free. Belly up to the bar, partner. The drinks are on the house. He stepped through the bat wings and into the deep folded shadows of the bar, and a strange thing occurred. He had been in here before once to check the inventory sheet Ullman had left, and he knew that the place had been stripped clean. The shelves were totally bare. But now, lit only murkily by the light which filtered through from the dining room, which was itself only dimly lit because of the snow blocking the windows, he thought he saw ranks and ranks of bottles twinkling mutedly behind the bar, and siphons, and even beer dripping from the spigots of all three highly polished taps. Yes, he could even smell beer. That damp and fermented and yeasty odor, no different from the smell that had hung finely misted around his father's face every night when he came home from work. Eyes widening, he fumbled for the wall switch, and the low, intimate bar lighting came on. Circles of 20-watt bulbs implanted on the top of the three wagon wheel chandeliers overhead. The shelves were all empty. They had not even as yet gathered a good coat of dust. The beer taps were dry, as were the chrome drains beneath them. To his left and right, the velvet upholstered booths stood like men with high backs, each one designed to give a maximum of privacy to the couple inside. Straight ahead, across the red carpeted floor, 40 bar stools stood around the horseshoe-shaped bar. Each stool was upholstered in leather and embossed with cattle brands. Circle H, Bar D Bar. That was fitting. Rocking W, Lazy B. He approached it, giving his head a little shake of bewilderment as he did so. It was like that day on the playground when... But there was no sense in thinking about that now. Or thinking about that. I'm adding words. Deal with it. Still chest pains. Still, he could have sworn he had seen those bottles. Vaguely, it was true. The way you see the darkened shapes of furniture in a room where the curtains have been drawn. Mild glints on glass. The only thing that remained was that smell of beer. And Jack knew that that was the smell that faded into the woodwork of every bar in the world after a certain period of time, not to be eradicated by any cleaner invented, yet the smell here seemed sharp, almost fresh. He sat down on one of the stools and propped his elbows on the bar's leather-cushioned edge. At his left hand was a bowl for peanuts, now empty, of course. The first bar he'd been in for 19 months and the damn thing was dry. Just his luck. All the same, a bitterly powerful wave of nostalgia swept over him, and the physical craving for a drink seemed to work itself up from his belly to his throat to his nose and mouth, shriveling and wrinkling the tissues as it went, making them cry out for something wet and long and cold. He glanced at the shelves again in wild, irrational hope, but the shelves were just as empty as before. He grinned in pain and frustration. His fists, clenched slowly, made minute scratchings on the bar's leather-padded edge. "Hi, Lloyd," he said. "A little slow tonight, isn't it?" Lloyd said it was. Lloyd asked him what it would be. "Now, I'm really glad you asked me that," Jack said. "Really glad. Because I happen to have two 20s and two 10s in my wallet, and I was afraid they'd be sitting right there until sometime next April. There isn't a 7-Eleven around here, would you believe it? I thought they had 7-Elevens on the fucking moon." Lloyd sympathized. "So here's what," Jack said. "You set me up an even 20 martinis, an even 20 just like that Kazang. One for every month I've been on the wagon and one to grow on. You can do that, can't you? You aren't too busy? Jack said Lloyd said he wasn't busy at all. Good man. You light those Martians up right along the barn, I'm gonna take 'em down one by one. White man's burden, Lloyd, my man. Lloyd turned to do his job. Jack reached into his pocket for his money clip and came out with an Excedrin bottle instead. His money clip was on the bedroom bureau, and of course his skinny shank's wife had locked him out of the bedroom. Nice going, Wendy, you bleeding bitch. I seem to be momentarily light, Jack said. How's my credit in this joint anyhow? Lloyd said his credit was fine. That's super. I like you, Lloyd. You were always the best of them. Best damn barkeep between Bar and Portland, Maine. Portland, Oregon, for that matter. Trying to get rid of this accent. This voice that I'm doing isn't helping now. Lloyd thanked him for saying so. Jack thumped the cap from his Excedrin bottle, shook two tablets out, and flipped them into his mouth. The familiar acid-compelling taste flooded in. He had a sudden sensation that people were watching him, curiously and with some contempt. The booths behind him were full. They were graying. There were graying distinguished men and beautiful young girls, all of them in costume, watching this sad exercise in the dramatic arts with cold amusement. Jack whirled on his stool. The booths were all empty, stretching away from the lounge door to the left and the right. The line on the left, cornering to flank the bar's horseshoe curved down the short length of the room. Padded leather seats and backs, gleaming dark formica tables, an ashtray on each one, a book of matches in each ashtray. The words Colorado Lounge stamped on each in gold leaf above the Batwing door logo. He turned back, swallowing the rest of his Excedrin with a grimace. Lloyd, you're a wonder, he said. Set up already. Your speed is only exceeded by the soulful beauty of your Neapolitan eyes. Salute. Neapolitan. Neo, yeah, Neapolitan. Yeah, Neapolitan. Jack contemplated the 20 imaginary drinks, the martini glasses blushing droplets of condensation, each with a swizzle poked through a plump green olive. He could almost smell gin on the air. The wagon, he said. Have you ever been acquainted with a gentleman who was hopped up on the wagon? Lloyd allowed, as he had met such men from time to time. Have you ever renewed acquaintances with a man after he hopped back off? Lloyd could not, in all honesty, recall. You never did, then, Jack said. He curled his hand around the first drink, carried his fist to his mouth, which was open, and turned his fist up. He swallowed, then tossed the imaginary glass over his shoulder. The people were back again, fresh from their costume ball, studying him, laughing behind their hands. He could feel them. If the back bar had featured a mirror instead of those damn stupid empty shelves, he could see them. Let them stare. Fuck 'em. Let anybody stare who wanted to stare. No, you never did, he told Lloyd. Few men ever return from the fabled wagon, but those who do come with a fearful tale to tell. When you jump on, it seems like the brightest, cleanest wagon you ever saw, with 10-foot wheels to keep the bed of it high out of the gutter where all the drunks are laying around with their brown bags and their Thunderbird and their granddad flashes popsicle bourbon. You're away from all the people who throw you nasty looks and tell you to clean up your act or go put it on. in another town. From the gutter. That's the finest looking wagon you ever From the gutter, that's the finest looking wagon you ever saw, Lloyd, my boy. All hung with bunting and a brass band in front and three majorettes to each side twirling their batons and flashing their panties at you. Man, you gotta get on that wagon and away from the juicers that are straining canned heat, smelling their own puke to get high again, and poking along the gutter for butts with half an inch left below the filter. He drained two more imaginary drinks and tossed the glasses back over his shoulder. He could almost hear them smashing on the floor, and goddamn if he wasn't starting to feel hot. It was the Excedrin. So you climb up, he told Loy, and ain't you glad to be there? My God, yes, that's affirmative. That wagon is the biggest and best float in the whole parade, and everybody is lining the streets and clapping and cheering and waving all for you, except for the winos passed out in the gutter. Those guys used to be your friends, but that's all behind you now. He carried his empty fist to his mouth and sluiced down another. Sluiced down another. 4 down, 16 to go. Making excellent progress. He swayed a little on the stool. Let 'em stare if that's how they got off. Take a picture, folks. It'll last longer. Then you start to see things, Lloydie, my boy. Things you missed from the gutter. Like how the floor of the wagon is nothing but straight pine boards, so fresh they're still bleeding sap. And if you took your shoes off, you'd be sure to get a splinter. Like how the only furniture in the wagon is these long benches with high backs and no cushions to sit on. And in fact, they're nothing but pews with a songbook every 5 feet or so. They are nothing but pews. Like how all the people sitting in the pews on the wagon are these flat-chested Albertos in long dresses with a little lace around the collar, and their hair pulled back into buns until it's so tight you can almost hear it screaming. And every face is flat and pale and shiny, and they're all singing, "Shall we gather at the river? The beautiful, the beautiful river." And up front, there's this reeking bitch with blonde hair playing the organ and telling him to sing louder, sing louder. And somebody slams the songbook into your hands and says, "Sing it out, brother. If you expect to stay on this wagon, you gotta sing morning, noon, and night, especially at night." And that's when you realize what the wagon really is, Lloyd. It's a church with bars on the windows, a church for women and a prison for you. He stopped. Lloyd was gone. Worse still, he had never been there. The drinks had never been there. Only the people in the booths, the people from the costume party, and he could almost hear their muffled laughter as they held their hands to their mouths and pointed, their eyes sparkling with cool pinpoints of light. He whirled around again. "Leave me alone." All the booths were empty. The sound of laughter had died like a stir of autumn leaves. Jack stared at the empty lounge for a tick of time, his eyes wide and dark. A pulse beat noticeably in the center of his forehead. In the very center of him a cold certainty was forming, and that certainty was that he was losing his mind. He felt an urge to pick up the bar stool next to him, reverse it, and go through the place like an avenging whirlwind. Instead, he whirled back around to the bar and began to bellow, "Roll me over in the clover. Roll me over, lay me down, and do it again." Danny's face rose before him, not Danny's normal face, lively and alert, the eyes sparkling and open, but the catatonic, zombie-like face of a stranger, the eyes dull and opaque, the mouth pursed babyishly around his thumb. What he was doing, sitting here and talking to himself like a sulky teenager, when his son was upstairs someplace acting like something that belonged in a padded room, acting the way Wally Hollis said Vic Stenger had been before the men in the white coats had come to take him away. "But I never put a hand on him. God damn it, I didn't." "Jack? Jack?" The voice was timid. hesitant. He was so startled that he almost fell off the stool whirling around it. Jack was standing. Wendy was standing just inside the Batwing doors, Danny cradled in her arms like some wax and horror show dummy. The three of them made a tableau that Jack felt very strongly. It was just before the curtain of Act Two in some old-time temperance play, one so poorly mounted that the prop man had forgotten to stock the shelves of the den of iniquity. Inequity. I never touched him, Jack said thickly. I never have since the night I broke his arm. Not even a spanking. Jack, that doesn't matter now. What matters is this matters! He shouted. He brought one fist crashing down on the bar hard enough to make the empty peanuts dish jump. It matters, goddammit! It matters! Jack, we have to get off this mountain. Danny began to stir in her arms. The slack, empty expression on his face began to break up like a thick mat of ice over some buried surface. Like the paint. Like matte paint. His lips twisted as if at some weird taste. His eyes widened. His hands came up as if to cover them and dropped back. Abruptly, he stiffened in her arms. His back arched into a bow, making Wendy stagger, and he began to shriek. Mad sounds that escaped his straining throat in bolt after crazy echoing bolt. The sound seemed to fill the empty downstairs and come back at them like banshees. There might have been 100 Dannys, all screaming at once. Jack! She cried in terror. Oh God, Jack, what's wrong with him? He came off the stool, numb from the waist down, more frightened than he had ever been in his life. What hole had his son poked through and into? What dark nest? And what had been in there to sting him? Danny! He roared. Danny! Danny saw him. He broke his mother's grip with a sudden fierce strength that gave her no chance to hold him. He stumbled back against one of the boots and nearly fell into it. Daddy! He screamed, running to Jack, his eyes huge and affrighted. Oh, Daddy! Daddy, it was her! 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 Oh, Daddy! He slammed into Jack's arms like a blunt arrow, making Jack rock on his feet. Danny clutched at him furiously, at first seeming to pummel him like a fighter, clutching his belt and sobbing against his shirt. Jack could feel his son's face hot and working against his belly. Daddy, it was her. Jack looked slowly up into Wendy's face. Her eyes were like small silver coins. Wendy, voice soft, nearly purring. Wendy, what did you do to him? Wendy stared back at him in stunned disbelief. Her eyes pallid. She shook her head. Oh, Jack, you must know. Outside it had begun to snow again. A lot of yelling in these chapters. I'm sorry if it hurts your ears. But, you know, you gotta do what feels right, you know. So, there's gonna be a lot more. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie of The Shining, but there's gonna be a lot. Alright, thanks guys. Chapter 28 is on record. Chapter 29 is coming up.